Tag team wrestling used to be so cool. From the Midnights and the Rock and Roll Express, to Demolition and the Road Warriors, to the Steiners and the Hart Foundation, the Bulldogs, the Nasty Boys, to the Rockers, to Harlem Heat, the Hardys, Edge and Christian, the Dudley Boys, all the way to the Usos and the New Day. Tag team wrestling used to be a cornerstone of professional wrestling. And I'm just talking WWE. You could look outside of WWE at some of the most amazing tag teams. The Young Bucks, the Lucha Brothers, who are now in WWE, the Kings of Wrestling, the Briscoes, the Motor City Machine Guns. Man, I could go on and on naming all these great tag teams. And the difference between that era and the current era is those guys could get on TV and could get on pay-per-view. In 2026, it feels like a chore for WWE to put their tag team titles on a pay-per-view. AEW had one of the greatest tag team divisions in all of wrestling, and they introduced trios titles and completely screwed with the division, making both titles feel less important. Tag team wrestling currently, in my opinion, is at an all-time low, when it should be looked at as one of the most prominent championships and divisions in all of wrestling. The tag team championships should be seen as the world championships of their division. Hell, just a couple years ago, the tag team titles were in the main event of WrestleMania. But this wasn't due to the importance of the tag team championships or even tag team wrestling. It was the relevance of the storyline these characters were in. Without it, those tag titles might not even sniff the card itself. And how sad is that? People define pops in wrestling with the term the Road Warrior pop because nobody was getting reactions like the Road Warriors, one of the greatest tag teams in the history of professional wrestling. They were an attraction, they were a draw, they could sell out a building because people wanted to see the Road Warriors. Nowadays, a tag team as physically imposing and talented as the War Raiders are getting beaten up by Obafemi in a 2-on-1 situation on Raw. Tag team wrestling didn't die because fans stopped caring. It died because companies like WWE turned these teams into disposable warm-up acts for single stars without strong creative. Back in the 80s and the 90s, tag teams weren't just these single guys thrown together in these can you coexist narratives. They were real teams with names, with looks, with finishers so iconic that we remember the names to this day, and feuds that at times outshined what the World Championship was doing. You look at some of the great feuds from the territories between the Midnights and the Rock and Roll Express, some of the great matches between the Bulldogs and the Hart Foundation, the iconic TLC matches between Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, and the Hardy Boyz. But there was a point in time where things changed and where the divisions fell flat. In 2002, WWF at the time introduced a brand split, where the roster of WWE would be split between the two shows of Raw and SmackDown, including the tag team division. And as you split the division and the divisions become thin, WWE had to create teams out of necessity by pairing random single stars together. Now, in the case of SmackDown, during the SmackDown 6 era, we got some great matches between the Guerreros, Edge and Rey Mysterio, Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle. But this was a short-term surge because great wrestlers were in the ring having great matches. Everybody knew Edge and Rey Mysterio were single stars, Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit were single stars. The Guerreros were family, but at the end of the day, Eddie Guerrero was the one we all knew was going to go on to become a single star. Not to say anything disrespectful about Chavo, but Eddie is like no other. It's no disrespect to say that he was an anomaly. The titles slowly started losing their meaning as they bounced around between random pairings, short reigns that meant nothing, that I guarantee you do not remember. If anybody can be slapped into a team and win gold within a month, why should anyone treat those belts as important? Nowadays, teams are considered props for single storylines. It's a classic pattern of building a team long enough in order for them to turn and create a singles feud out of the team dynamic. What began with the Rockers became an archetype that we cannot escape from. Look at Y2 AJ in 2016, a team that lasted, what, 2 weeks? AJ and Jericho were already feuding. They had these shitty shirts made like we're supposed to believe this is going to be a team. No, this is clearly just a setup for a feud between the two, which obviously was the direction they should have been going in, but using that division in such a disrespectful way is just another example of how you damage the reputation of the division itself. The concept of being in a tag team is a stepping stone for what is clearly more important as a single. The New Day proved that it takes years to really gel as a pairing. The New Day did not start off hot when they became an act in 2014. People hated it. It wasn't until about 6 to 8 months into their actual time as a team where the chemistry really started to show on screen. They came into their own and they became one of the most entertaining acts in the company. A great heel team and then a great babyface team. And in 2017, they'd go on to have one of the best tag team feuds of the modern era with the Usos, capping off in the very first tag team championship Hell in a Cell. And it was a great match because it was two teams that we had invested in, that we believed in, that weren't booked to be this quasi single star feud building mechanism. It was two teams, two brotherhoods that we believed in clashing for the championships and making the championships feel like they mattered, because they should and they do when you try and make them matter. Perception is reality. Nowadays, there is no long-term rivalries for the tag team championships that make the tag team championships the most important aspect. Like the Steiners and the Midnights, the Hardys, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian. These went months, even years of constant escalation. These modern rivalries are 3 weeks of TV capping off at a championship match on TV because the tag team titles in 2026 are not important enough to be on the main show. On SmackDown, you have teams like the Motor City Machine Guns that can't even get TV time. You had DIY. You have the Street Profits currently working NXT house shows. You can't get them on the main card. And when we do get a feud, we get a match and then everyone forgets it even happened. Tag team matches nowadays are filler. They're not a feature. And you know what? Let's talk about AEW, because in my opinion, from 2019, AEW had one of the greatest tag team divisions in all of wrestling. You had SCU, you had the Young Bucks, Private Party, Jurassic Express, the Lucha Brothers, hell, the Butcher and the Blade, and so many more. And the teams were building, the division was strong, the matches were great, the matches mattered. But as great as the division became, they introduced trios titles. And the issue with trios titles is a lot of tag teams ended up picking up a third in order to fill the trios division, and the tag team division ended up feeling like the little brother. You don't need both. Lucha Underground is a great example because they had trios championships and it was great, but they didn't have tag team championships. They just focused on the trios. You don't need the 2-man teams and the 3-man teams. It's the same issue that WWE created with the brand split, where you're just splitting the divisions and having less depth in either of them. It's unnecessary. You don't need all these championships. And hell, in WWE, you don't need 2 sets of tag team titles. You need 1 set that you can make matter and have a strong division of teams fight for it. Now, there are modern teams that are exceptions to the rule. Like I mentioned, the Usos, the New Day, FTR, DIY before Tommaso left. When they're allowed to cook, they've proved that tag team wrestling in the modern era can get over. Another example of this is NXT Black and Gold. NXT Black and Gold from 2016 to about 2021, because 2014 and 15 there was a lot of experiment, but I think 2016 is where they really started to get it. That's when FTR, or the Revival at the time, Enzo and Cass were at peak popularity. You had American Alpha. Then as we go on, we had DIY, Mustache Mountain, the Undisputed Era, the War Raiders, the Authors of Pain, Sanity. All these great tag teams, and we were getting some of the best tag team wrestling matches that we had ever seen in WWE since the 90s. And yes, NXT was a more niche audience, but that excitement translated to the main roster would have the very same effect. The titles matter as much as you want to make them matter. Perception is reality. When you don't give them pay-per-view time, when you barely give them TV time, when you tell the audience that they don't matter, they won't believe in them. It's up to you to present them in a way of importance. And I know the title says the death of tag team wrestling, but it does not have to stay dead. You can fix it. You have the talent. You have the ability. There is nothing stopping you from making the tag team division matter again, but the WWE, AEW, professional wrestling companies need to be at the forefront of making them feel important. It's not up to us to make them important for you. You make them important for us. Give us a reason to care, and we will, because tag team wrestling is awesome when you give it the love that it deserves.